Matthew shares a birth story as Luke shares a birth story, but Mark and John do not. And so there was a concern and an interest in their communities about where Jesus came from and tell us about his birth. The next thing that happens in Matthew is the baptism. It's like 30 years later, Jesus appears on the scene. John the Baptist is baptizing at the River Jordan, and Jesus is baptized by John the Baptist. It is his official beginning, the inauguration, where he hears the voice from heaven, "You are my beloved Son, with you I'm well pleased." In some ways, it's like an adoption. God has now adopted in words and language that everybody hears and understands Jesus. And so Matthew's community is hearing, oh, this Jesus has been chosen by God. But be aware that right now we still don't know anything about him, right? If you are reading Matthew or hearing it read to you for the first time, you still don't really know much about who this person is. Well, you start to get a little sense of who he is with the temptations in the wilderness and the stories of the devil, which also you might recollect I shared as the culture and the civilization at the time, society at the time, had certain, let's call them conventional wisdoms dealing with power and authority and wealth and how those would be acted upon and exercised. And Jesus says no to all of them. So now we start to get a bit of a sense of who Jesus is, but we still don't know too much about him. Well, he calls disciples, starting in Matthew and in Luke at the seaside. He calls some fishermen. And so we now understand, well, he's a teacher. If nothing else, he's a teacher. He's a rabbi. And he has something to teach. And he has people that are going to listen to him and follow him. So these followers, these disciples, are now called by him and now stay with him. And he is their teacher. But you might still be saying to yourself, if you're reading this for the first time, you might say, but we don't really know yet what he teaches. And that is true. If you are just looking at the Gospel of Matthew, or Luke even, for the first time, it's like, but what does he stand for? What does he have to say about anything? Then there's something that I call a ministry summary. It's just a short little paragraph, and it just tells us that Jesus is out preaching and teaching and healing, and people come from all over to be healed, demoniacs and paralytics and people that are sick and ill. They come to be healed by him. And so now you're going to probably say to yourself, well, there's a kind of a broad statement. Sounds like he's a healer. Sounds like he's kind of like a medicine man. He heals people, and that's what Jesus does. But you still do not know much about what he believes. You have a little bit of a sense about who